In the winter of 1886, temperatures plunged to 60 degrees below zero. It was a cold that killed everything. 90% of all cattle on the northern plains froze to death where they stood. Historians call it the Big Die-Up. But one man's herd survived, completely untouched. His neighbors had called him a madman because while they spent the summer buying cattle, he spent it digging. But before we start our story, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss any new stories. The Dakota Territory of the 1880s was a place of explosive, speculative wealth. Eastern investors poured millions into the cattle boom. The philosophy was simple: more cattle, more grass, more money. The prevailing wisdom insisted that cattle were tough. They could survive the harsh prairie winters by foraging through the snow, just as the buffalo had done for centuries. It was called the free-range system. It meant maximum profit with zero infrastructure cost. And the king of this system was a man named Cornelius Wade. He controlled over 50,000 acres. His herds numbered in the thousands. He was the pinnacle of territorial wealth, and he believed building shelters was a waste of money. Then Silas Brennan arrived, and he saw a fatal flaw in the system. Brennan wasn't a cattleman. He was a mining engineer from Pennsylvania. He understood structural integrity. He understood insulation. And he understood what happens when you are unprepared for the true power of nature. While other ranchers bought more cows, Brennan studied the land. He consulted with the local Lakota tribes. The elders warned him. They told him of winters so severe, so brutal, that even the buffalo sought shelter in deep ravines. The other ranchers, rich and confident, dismissed these warnings. They called it primitive superstition. Brennan, the engineer, called it data. He bought a modest ranch on the Cannonball River. And then he did something that baffled the entire territory. He started digging. All spring, all summer, he and a small team excavated. His neighbors were confused. The territorial press, the Bismarck Tribune, wrote editorials about him. They called his project an obsession bordering on madness. They questioned why any rational man would waste a fortune digging holes instead of buying livestock. But Brennan wasn't just digging holes. He was building. He was an engineer. He was constructing a single, massive underground complex. It had reinforced support beams. It had carefully calculated drainage systems. It had ventilation shafts that extended deep into the prairie soil. It looked more like a mine than a ranch. As autumn approached, the project was finished. From the surface, it looked like nothing, just a modest mound of earth with a few wide entrances. It was almost invisible. His neighbors, like Cornelius Wade, moved their thousands of cattle to their winter grazing grounds, confident and unconcerned. The first snows of November began to fall. The air grew sharp. The ranchers were optimistic. They were completely unaware that they were standing on the edge of the greatest natural disaster in American livestock history. On December 15th, the cold descended. It was not just weather. It was a physical killing force. Military stations recorded 40 degrees below zero. The wind was so sharp it sounded like breaking glass. On Cornelius Wade's massive ranch, the cattle began to die. They died in hours. The snow buried the prairie grass beneath a layer of ice so thick not even the strongest bulls could break through. The free-range philosophy was a fatal fantasy. Wade, his empire collapsing, sent desperate telegraph messages. His 50,000 acres had become a frozen wasteland. The territorial capital received reports of similar devastation from every direction. The Big Die-Up had begun. But 15 miles south, Silas Brennan opened the doors to his earthen mound. He moved his cattle down the wide, gentle ramps. They filed into the massive underground chambers. The animals settled onto beds of dried grass. Above ground, the temperature continued its relentless drop toward 50, then 60 degrees below zero. But in Brennan's shelter, the temperature held steady at 20 degrees above zero. His engineering had worked. The earth-bermed walls captured and held the cattle's own body heat. His carefully designed ventilation shafts drew the deadly cold air through deep earthen passages, warming it to a survivable temperature before it ever reached the animals. He had created a pocket of life buried beneath a frozen wasteland where nothing else could survive. When March finally came, the first break in the weather revealed the full scope of the catastrophe. The prairie was a battlefield, a graveyard. Cornelius Wade rode across his vast land. He had lost over 80% of his herd. The territorial cattle industry worth millions, had been completely destroyed. The free-range system was dead. It was Wade himself who first spotted the anomaly. Riding south, he saw something in the distance that seemed impossible. Movement. He spurred his horse, driven by a desperate curiosity. He rode to the Cannonball River, and he saw Brennan's herd. They were healthy, strong, well-fed. They looked as if they had just spent the winter in a warm barn. The man he had dismissed as a madman was the only one left standing. Wade examined the complex. He saw the steam rising from the ventilation shafts. He felt the warm air coming from the entrances. He finally understood. The engineering was brilliant. The obsession was, in fact, the only solution. Word spread like wildfire. The man who had been called crazy was now a visionary. Cowboys and ruined ranchers made pilgrimages to Brennan's operation. They came to see the impossible. The territorial livestock inspector, who had once questioned the project, now measured the tunnels with a new respect. 10 years later, the Dakota Prairie was a different landscape. It was dotted with new earthen mounds, underground cattle complexes, all modeled on Brennan's revolutionary design. The banks would no longer give loans to ranchers who didn't have engineered shelters. The man who spent a summer digging holes while his neighbors bought cows had not just saved his own herd, he had saved the future of American ranching.